Hey everyone, I'm Jay, and in today's lab, we're going to take a look at something called scope and passing information to functions and back from functions. And so in a previous lab, we created some functions, but we didn't feed the functions any information, and the functions didn't return any information to us. So we're going to do that a little bit because that's one of the great things that functions can do as well. You call a function, but you give it information. Like we've been using the print function, and we've been telling the print function what to print. The print function hasn't been returning anything, but we've also used the input function, and that did return values, right? The input function did both. We gave it some information, it did something with it, and then it gave us back information. So we're going to create a couple of functions, one that doesn't give us anything back and one that does give us something back. And in both cases, we're going to be doing something called pass by value and not pass by reference. We'll talk a little bit about that, but we'll definitely get more in depth about that in later videos. So let's take a look at the requirements, and we're going to start off same way we always do by creating our file header, right, with our who the author is and a little bit of information about the file. And then we're going to create a couple of functions here. I have scope test1, scope test2, and then our main function as well, right? You don't necessarily have to create them physically in that order in your code, but I'm writing them in that order because that's how I want you to process them in your mind, okay? So scope test one, that function is going to do the following things. It's going to take an integer argument named input age, and the names of everything is quite important because when we talk about scope, a function can have a variable called input age. Okay, so scope test one is going to have a variable called input age. Our main function is going to have a variable called input age as well. Those are not the same. The function has its own variables that it can access. It can't directly, automatically access variables that are larger than itself. Okay, not every programming language is the same with that regard. Scope is, in some languages, it's very difficult to follow. But generally speaking, when you're inside of a function, you cannot access variables that are outside of the function. Okay, that's like a hacking incident right there. If you create a function that has access to information it doesn't necessarily need, and a hacker can call your function, they could possibly manipulate the way they call your function in order to get information that they shouldn't be getting. Okay, so you don't want to do that. And this is kind of going to illustrate that, right? So we're creating our function, we're giving it a variable called input age. We're going to set that value equal to the input age that was passed to us plus 20. Okay. And then we're going to output a message that has the value of input age is plus the value of input age. Okay. Don't just do in your print statement, don't just do the string plus the integer. That's a no-no. You have to do it the right way. I wrote it this way for simplicity. This is pseudocode. Okay. So if I write something in here and you copy and paste it and it doesn't work, this is pseudocode. All right. And then this function is not going to return any value. Okay. So we're just going to take the value that was given to us, add to it, print out a message, and that's done. Okay. On to function scope test 2. This one is going to be string based. We're going to take an argument in the form of a string called input name, create a variable called username, set that variable equal to a value from input name. Okay. Print the message, the name is username, change the username to your last name, and then print the message again, the name is username, should be different this time, right? And then make the function return whatever the current value of username is, okay? Now we'll take a look at the main function. What we're going to do with the main function is create a variable called input age. Now remember, input age now is being created in the main function and in our scope test 1 function. We're going to set this one equal to 21. We're going to output a message. The value of input age is input age. Call scope test 1 with the argument of input age. So we're going to give we've output our input age of 21. We're going to give that value to scope test 1. Scope test 1 is going to run, do its thing. And then we're going to output the maybe new value of input age. I don't know, we'll see. That's it for the scope test 1 part. Scope test 2 part, we're going to create a variable called username. Now remember, username is also in the main and in scope test 2 as well. We're going to set that equal to Alice. We're going to print the message. The name is username, so Alice. We're going to set the username equal to the function scope test 2 with the argument of username. So username equals, so just like we've been doing in the past with getting input from the user, some variable equals input. Now it's some variable equals our function. We're going to give our function that username. It's going to do its thing, and then it's going to return the username, and then we're going to print the message again with the new username, I guess, right? And then there's some extra points if you tab over your outputs in your functions only, not in your main, so that it better visualizes what the scope is at the time. All right, so let's have a look at the code that I have. And so I have my starting info at the top. We're doing a program that tests out the scope of variables in and out of functions. Goodness me. And I have my main first. We're going to skip that and go down to scope test 1. So scope test 1 takes an integer argument called, let me stop running there, called input age. It adds input age equal to input age plus 20. So basically, it is itself plus 20. So we're doing a little Rip Van Winkle here. And then we're going to print the value of input age is, comma, input age. Right? And I put 4 extra spaces right here so we can tab over. And that's it for scope test 1's function. Let's have a look at our main. Okay, our main, I'm going to print a blank line. I'm going to create a variable called input age, set it to 21. And then I'm going to print a message. The value of input age is input age. Whatever it is, it's 21, right? It better be, we just set it to 21. And then I'm going to call scope test 1 and give it that value input age. Now this is important. I mentioned earlier something called pass by value and pass by reference. Those are the two ways we can call functions. We can either, when we give a function this value right here, input age, I could give it the value of input age, which is the default way functions work in most languages. So I'm giving it the value of 21. That's going to that function. And then that function can take that value of 21 with whatever variables it would like and do whatever processes it would like. And it has that value. However, the main function's actual variable input age is never going to be manipulated by this function because I've only given it the value that was in there, okay? Now you could do something that's called pass by reference. There's a special way to do it, which we're not going to do in this video. But if you pass by reference, then that says, all right, I'm going to give the actual variable to this function, and then if the function modifies it, it's really modified on the outside of the function. That is something you can do. It becomes very useful at times, but it's not the default way to do it because something in all of computer development that's called the least privilege access. Okay, functions should not get the privilege of changing values unless you specifically give them that privilege, right? If they don't need it, they shouldn't have it. That's the same thing with functions. That's the same thing with a lot of things, actually. Not everybody at work needs the master password to everything. Right? If they don't need it, they don't have it. Same thing with functions. So we're going to give input age to scope test 1. And remember, scope test 1 is going to add 20, and then it's going to output it. And then we're going to come back here, and we're going to output its value. It's not going to be 41, right? I have the output right down here that you can see. It is back to 21 because scope test 1 does not have access to change the value of input age outside of scope test 1. It can't do it. Okay. Now going back up here to the main, create a variable called username, set it to Alice, okay, which is very common in programming. All right, we got Alice. We're going to print the name is username Alice. I can do a plus this time because it's a string concatenated with a string. Okay. Now I'm going to say the username is now going to be equal to scope test 2, and I'm going to give it the username. Right? So I'm going to call scope test 2, give it the username, and whatever results from that will get assigned to username. So let's call scope test 2. We have the input name. Okay. Scope test 2 can call this variable whatever it likes. I can call it poopy pants if I wanted to, and scope test 2 would be fine. May not look professional, but I can call it whatever I like. And I'm also going to have a username in here as an example and say username equals input name. Going to print. So in this case, it's going to say the name is Alice. We have it right down here. The name is Alice. And then it's going to change the username to my last name, Mihawk. And then it's going to output the username is Mihawk. And then it's going to return the current value of username, which is the username variable from within scope test 2. Going to return that value. That value is going to come out here to username, and then we're going to print the name is username, and it will be the name is Mihawk, right? And we returned that value from the function, and we were able to have it change. Okay. Now, if I came in here and I said I want to return input name, okay. Now I've given username to scope test 2. Username comes to scope test 2 in the form of input name, created a new variable called username, set it equal to input name, modified it, but then returned the original input name. If I run it now, you'll see there's a little difference. Okay. Now when it returns, that's going to be Alice at the very end because input name here was not modified. Okay. Now, alternatively, I can stop. If I were to make all of these things username, let me get rid of that line. We don't need that one anymore. And say that scope test 2 is only referencing the variable username. Okay, let's try and trick it. I'm going to run and debug. Now it's still the same. Okay. Just like it was before. We've actually changed it. It's only changed because we returned the value. Okay. And that is this example of scope. Okay. In the first case, we did not change the value outside of the function because we didn't return anything. In the second case, the only way we were able to change the value is because we returned that value, we gave it back, and we actually assigned it right here with this assignment operator. Okay. If it wasn't for this assignment operator, which says take whatever is on the right-hand side of the assignment operator and assign it to the variable on the left. If it wasn't for that, this username and the end would not change. All right, so hope you were able to follow that. Scope does get quite tricky. This is just one or two examples of scope. Other languages, it can get quite tricky at times, but we'll do it one step at a time. All right. So that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.